Sveiki! So greetings from the Freedom Monument here in the center of Riga in Latvia. Just ahead of me I got the old town of Riga, got the quiet center up there behind me further on. And you know, it's Eastern Europe, it's summer. I'm shooting this video in August 2023. And this is a time where a lot of guys travel to Eastern Europe, the Baltics, to Central Europe, like Poland, and they're hoping to meet a beautiful local lass. But alas, they often, more often than not, lack the right strategy in terms of doing well on the dating market here, and it turns into a fiasco, their trip. So, in today's video, I'm going to outline the 5 biggest mistakes that I see Western guys making when they come here to Eastern Europe in the summer of 2023 with respect to dating the local beauties. So let's get into it. Поехали!
SAR Experience.
So the first big mistake that I see a lot of guys make when they come here to this region is they focus on online dating. Now, in the past, online dating was a bit better. When I say online dating, I mean primarily Tinder. It can also be the Ukrainian bride business, these kind of marriage agency sites where they're looking at photos of women online and whatnot, and then expecting their potential bride to be here waiting for them. Now with the Russo-Ukrainian war, a lot of obviously Ukrainian women who are maybe still on these sites are in other cities, like maybe here in Riga. And there are a lot of issues with using online dating. And the biggest one is quality. In my experience, talking to very beautiful women, I think this is global, probably also applies in the West, the most beautiful women don't bother so much with online dating because they already have enough options. They don't need to be spending hours there swiping right. Because let's face it, if you're a pretty woman, most guys are going to swipe right in you anyways, and then they're going to have to filter through all these profiles when probably they're getting asked out by the local hotshots in any case. So the first problem is the fact that very beautiful women with options are not going to spend so much time on Tinder. Or they're definitely not going to be on a marriage agency website either. I think that goes without saying. So on top of that, the next issue is the number of men versus the number of women on something like Tinder. Well, as you'd expect, there are substantially more men using the site. So obviously if you're a man looking for dates with women, it's not stocked in your favor either, the fact that there are a lot more men. And next issue is, of course, that men are less picky. In general, I saw a stat that men will swipe right, so affirmatively, on 60% of profiles, whilst women was more like 20%. Actually saw stats going down as low as 4.5%. So basically, women are a lot more picky. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing is beside the point, but they're basically swiping left a lot more than men are. And that means when you have women who are not as beautiful on Tinder, you got a lot less women, and you got women swiping right a lot less. Then obviously using Tinder, investing a lot of time into it, isn't going to be a great idea because you're basically going to have women who are lower value and have the perception of having a lot more options than men being there on the profile. And I see that, and I think actually Tinder, once they made it possible to do the boost and this kind of like passport option where you can be abroad but then pretend you're in the city or swipe as you're in the city, I think that pushed a lot of, say, lower value men who are paying for that extra access to the top of kind of the algorithm because they're paying for it. I understand the reason. But then if you're an attractive woman on the other side, you're showing all these profiles of guys you're not probably as interested in. And then your incentive to be on it is even less. And maybe the guy doesn't even live in the city and he's just kind of fishing around to see what's on offer. So again, not great if you're an attractive woman. It's probably wasting your time. So I just think this is degraded, online dating. Ironically, one would think that, when you look at the overall stats, there's some stat in the States now that 51% of couples actually meet online. But when you do, when you dive deeper into the research and you take women who have options, like beautiful women, it is a lot less. I saw some street interviews where they went around in the US and it was like, I think it was less than 15% had met online, in fact, when they stopped the women that they thought were the most beautiful. So interesting. So Tinder is definitely not a great place if you want to meet the uber beautiful. it's just not going to be a good investment of your time. So that's the other thing. You're going to spend a lot of time swiping, you're going to start a lot of conversations. You have opportunity costs. Now, I understand if you're back home and you got no options and you're going to be swiping right, maybe you don't see it as a big cost, but when you're here, it just doesn't seem to be the place. Now, I do help my clients with improving their dating profiles. And the reason I still do that is because by having good photos, you can also put them on your Instagram. So basically what we would do is we would take some pro pics. Often I just take them on my camera when I'm hanging out with clients anyways, get those kind of snapshots. And then I send them over to some beautiful, normally Ukrainian girls who are friends of mine. They just kind of say yes, no, and they pick out the best pics, right? So then you have them obviously reviewed by model level beauty girls, exactly what you should be looking for. And then we take FaceApp and we make them just a little bit better. So then you have these class photos, and most men don't put good photos, definitely not vetted photos by beautiful women onto Tinder. So you should go up higher, because really you need to be in the top % of profiles to even bother opening Tinder nowadays, in my opinion. Otherwise you're just probably not going to get that many good options. Plus, you got to remember that online dating in general, and also combined with the culture in a lot of, we'll say, Eastern Europe. Now I'm focusing a lot on what I call New Europe, so it's maybe not quite far as east as it was in the past. Often the norm kind of is that a man will invite a woman out. Most guys are boring. They invite the woman to a restaurant, they're going to pay the bill, or some other activity that normally they try to pay for something to impress them. And if you are an unscrupulous, bored girl, you would have no problem getting an expensive date paid for you every day as an experience. And that happens quite a lot. Now, the girls are actually not really interested in the guy at all. They're interested in the free food. And in Ukraine, a couple years outlined what I call the meal plan scam, where girls are just doing this 3 times a day and eating in nice restaurants, taking Instagram photos, upgrading their Instagram profile. So yeah, it's just a really bad investment, I find, nowadays, especially if you are trying to meet the most beautiful women. Now, if you're a guy who's super good looking, did all your pro photos, you get tons of matches, and you're willing to date down like 4 or 5 points, then go knock yourself out. You're probably going to do fine using Tinder, because it is really probably good for women who are not the best looking. And you see that quite a lot here, like when we're down in Warsaw. You very rarely see Western guys with when I say Western guys, I mean guys from North America, Latin America, and Western Europe. You basically don't see them with any attractive women. You see them with like a plump 3, a 4 maybe, in terms of attractiveness. And that's because, yeah, on Tinder, it's pretty easy to meet those girls, I would say, or at least it's possible, because they don't have very many high-level options locally, so they're going to be more open to a foreigner in that case, so you can meet them on Tinder. But basically the magic really happens on Instagram, and that's why I think if we do the photos anyways for your Tinder, we can just put them all on Instagram afterwards, so you don't really lose anything by actually setting up a proper Tinder profile. But over the last year or so, almost none of my clients really use Tinder anymore. Because they just find that going out and socializing with a strong social circle is a lot more effective, and using their Instagram afterwards to demonstrate their value. And obviously the guys I'm picking to be my clients in person are guys that have value, so it's just a question of really demonstrating, make sure that they set up their Instagram to be on point, demonstrate the value, and attract the women that they're going to be interested in, who are beautiful, obviously, in this region. So as I said, Instagram is really where the magic happens online, because either you've met the girl in person while you're walking around here during the day, out socializing at night, part of a new social circle. Maybe you've even met her on Tinder, and you just move her over to Instagram, where you can actually display more value than you would just from a Tinder profile. Now, there are a few things I've noticed online, because you have a lot of charlatans in this space. I empathize with a lot of guys who are struggling with dating, that it's very hard to judge here on Instagram who's legit and who's not. And unfortunately, in an unregulated space, well, it attracts a lot of charlatans. So I would say always look at whether that guy who's advising you has what you want to achieve, and whether he is teaching you the methods that allowed him to achieve that. So if he has a beautiful wife or local girlfriend, then is he teaching the methods by which he met that girlfriend? Because often they're well, most of these dating coaches don't have very many girls. They're kind of drifters for many years. No girlfriend should be a red flag for you. And even when they do, often they openly say that they didn't meet them doing what they teach, because a lot of them are teaching day game or online game, and then they say, actually, yeah, she was a friend of a friend. Or, you know, I met her because I had a business, I went to an event, basically social circle. So yeah, just always be careful of that. But one of the funny things that I see happening now is, because I'm known as the insider for this region, obviously their viewers or prospective clients react to my advice and tell them, well, hey, Connor says this is not working or that's not working. And then they come up with lots of different strategies to try and get around that. So one of them that I've seen with respect to online dating is, I had done a little experiment with a client where we put his profile first on Tinder as a tourist, and then we changed it to him having actually moved to the city. What we saw is that the number of matches, the quantitative number of matches was 4 or 5 times higher, and he perceived women as qualitatively higher as well. Now, the advice that I've seen from some dodgy dating coaches is, well, just lie on your dating profile, put in Tinder that you live in the city, you know, use the passport option and pretend you're there. And if she asks why we can't meet for next week, it's because you're traveling back and whatnot, right? So that is optimizing, of course, for a very low probability opportunity for a very short-term relationship, probably a one-night stand, right? Maybe once in a blue moon, that's gonna work. The girl's gonna think you live in the city, and then when she meets you, you might be able to make something happen on that 1 or 2 day window that you have in the city. But you're probably gonna come off as very pushy for a guy who actually lives there. And it's gonna be a bit of a logistical nightmare because, you know, especially the more attractive women, they're not in a rush really, if they think the guy lives in the city as well, to meet up immediately, right? It can happen once in a blue moon, as I said, but really it's not. And the real solution is, of course, not to have to lie about it, but actually to, even if you don't live in the city, actually come back regularly, right? So that's what I'd say on that. Lying in general, yeah, it optimizes very short term. Leaving aside the ethical part, obviously lying just, it's not in general the best thing to be up to if you want a long-term relationship in particular, but it also is not optimal for actually meeting women in general. Just be honest and make sure you come back to the region, it's a lot better. And on top of it, like, especially in, we'll say, Eastern Europe or New Europe, this region, most girls, they're not as much into one-night stands, right? So, you know, you might go on a coffee date or a cocktail date. That's what I recommend. Don't go for the restaurant because you're probably going to end up attracting the girls who are into the meal plan scam. So that's why I always say it's the Gisele Bündchen rule. I called it up because I saw Gisele Bündchen before she met Tom Brady, which is many years ago, obviously. She said she refused to go on dinner dates because she didn't want to be stuck with someone that she wasn't interested in. Obviously, she was not interested in using the guy for money since she was super wealthy. So she just saw a waste of her time. So she said, only cocktails and coffee. Agree with that. And the thing is, if in general, meeting a girl for a coffee or cocktail is not going to lead to anything intimate, then you're going to have to schedule a second, third, maybe even 4 or 5 dates in order to get to know the girl better. And then maybe you're going to have some intimacy. And again, if you're optimizing for a one-night stand by lying on your Tinder, then that's just not going to work, is it? You're basically not going to be around often enough or long enough in order to make it happen. So I would say you need to think a little bit more strategically than these very short-term strategies to try and get laid, basically.
So this is the very worst city that I've been to in Eastern Europe, shall we say, for dating apps. So, you know, the amount of fake profiles here is just through the roof. I would say it's not even worth considering out here. It's just a complete waste of time. It's full of fake profiles and people looking to try and fish your phone number or your Telegram profile and then spam you. No, just it's a waste of time here. You've got to get yourself out and about and you've got to do things the old-fashioned way.
So I'm here walking around near the train station, Central Train Station in Warsaw, and this is a place where I see the next biggest mistake, which is hordes of horny foreigners doing what's known as day game. All around here in these streets you will see foreign guys. Normally they're hanging out in groups as well, and then they go and they approach the lovely ladies of Warsaw or people who are tourists coming in off the trains, and they shoot their shot. They basically do this cold approach. And as you'd imagine, when you have a large number of guys all doing this, it becomes a bit like having a large number of beggars. I often refer to them as dating panelers. I have another video why it's for losers, and basically it's a bit creepy in general. Ось, ти думаєш, що це погана ідея хлопець мені робить?
100%.
Так, так. Окей.
Ну, якщо тобі цікава дівчина, то просто можна підійти, типу, так і говорити, що я хочу з тобою познайомитись, ти мені сподобалась. Коли це підходять з якимись такими висловлюваннями, то воно сразу нет.
І теж ти розмовляєш англійського ціни?
Англійською не розмовляю.
Окей. Теж він поговорив англійського з тобою, так?
Ну так, я його і не до кінця розуміла в цілому. Ну, почула, що він подумав, що я дівчина з Тіндера. Він, напевно, йшов на зустріч з такою дівчиною.
Так.
От.
And quite often, these guys, they recognize me because of my channel on YouTube, they've seen some of my content, and they come up and we chat a little bit. And I ask them a very simple question. How often does this actually work for you, that you end up in some sort of intimate relationship with the girl that you approach? And the answer universally has been almost never. First of all, the flake rate from doing this is extremely high, because the girls, a lot of the time, they just want to give the contact to get rid of him, because it's a bit weird in Polish culture or culture in this region, this part of Europe, for guys to come up to girls and, you know, open with some normally pretty lame line. So this is not very high value behavior. Now, I did a video many years ago in St. Petersburg where I went with a day gaming coach, and we walked around and I opened 10 girls, 5 in Russian, 5 in English, and you know, I got one decent lead out of that when the girls seemed interested. Otherwise, it wasn't necessarily unpleasant or anything, but I never did it again because I frankly have enough other options as a guy from doing other more normal things to meet women, basically going to a lot of high value events and going out clubbing, having a strong social circle. You know, I can talk to girls in my favorite cafe where I'm hanging out half the day as well. I don't need to walk the streets like some sort of weird stalker. And I have a very interesting observation about it, which is that if the guy looked very good, like he was tall in shape, well coiffed, as the first guy actually filmed was, then the girl was pretty interested because, well, she has an attractive man come up to her. But when the guy was not, the girls basically made excuses to get rid of them. So it is, unless you're a super high value guy in terms of looks, probably a waste of your time. And on top of it, if you are that kind of guy, you can meet women in a myriad of other ways. You don't need to be walking around a shopping mall pestering women in order to get their phone number. You can get it by being a normal high value guy.
So my opinion of day games in general is these are sleazy people, and they are chancing their arm, should we say, on trying to get themselves with average beauty level women perhaps. But it's not really something which is for me. Absolutely not, because when we rock up at some of the best places that are going around, you know, we just need to be ourselves and just interact with some of the locals, and, you know, just by doing things organically, we know the opportunity will come our way. So yeah, the thought of tapping every girl on the shoulder or whatever in some mall, not really necessary if you know what you're doing, where you're going, and I mean, come on, yeah, some of the places we've been going to, we're almost like little local celebrities around here, and we're known almost by first name terms now in some of the places we go to, in some of the top places to go to as well. So it's just not really necessary or on our radar.
So you can see the sun is setting here in Warsaw in Poland, and we are going into the nighttime, which is a nice segue into the next biggest mistake that I see guys make when they come here, and that is how they approach nightlife, bars and clubs, selecting them, and probably how they behave in them. And I often see criticism of my advice here on YouTube about meeting girls in bars and clubs, and it basically goes along the lines of there are no good girls in nightclubs, My answer to that would be if you're not meeting the good girls or high quality girls at night, it's either that you're going to the wrong types of places, because most women do socialize to a certain extent in the evening. Maybe they're not at the club every day, but they do go from time to time. Or it's actually just the environment of being in a bar and nightclub. It's not your thing and you don't enjoy yourself, and probably then you transfer that negativity to the girls that you meet there, or you're just getting targeted by dodgy girls because you probably went to the tourist trap, which is the main point I want to make, because most guys, when they come here to Eastern Europe, they will inevitably end up at a tourist trap bar or club. Usually general admission, easy to find in the city center. And think of it back home as well. Like, I was born in Ireland. We have a place called Temple Bar. Now, you won't meet so many Irish people down in Temple Bar. You're mainly going to meet tourists, because it is a tourist trap. Now, it doesn't mean it's terrible to go there and have a pint of Guinness, but if you want to meet the cool and trendy locals or the super hotties of Dublin, you're probably not going to meet them in Temple Bar. Most likely you might meet a nice tourist girl, but not going to be a local girl, because we don't tend, if we are living in the city or as a local, go to the tourist traps. So that is the first thing, selecting the venue and finding out which are the cool places is not so easy. Now, it's gotten easier. You can use Instagram, you can use forums, there's probably good information there. But normally it requires a little bit of research and actually going and testing them and seeing which are the places. That's why it's good to have the insider, as I'm known as in Eastern Europe, for that, because obviously I go and I find the good spots for you. So imagine this, like a lot of foreign guys also, they will be in a group of guys or they're doing a solo mission. And they're not with, number one, any local girls, and they're not in a cool crew. And they probably don't have a table at the club. So if you're going to a club in particular, it's one that focuses on tables, then, contrast the experience of a group of 4 or 5 lads from London showing up, general mission club, without a table, no girls, like every other effing tourist guy, basically, nothing to distinguish themselves, versus a guy who's going to the cool inside place, has a table at it, probably knows the staff, hanging out with a cool crew, probably got some local hotties already with him, just chilling at his table. That is the contrast in the experience if you go out at night in terms of how you approach things. So don't be one of those foreign guys who comes here and basically ends up fighting over the crumbs at some tourist trap, Old Town Riga bar, with the other hordes of horny foreigners. I used to always say that about Odessa, that you had those hordes of foreigners chasing the girls, and probably 99% of them are not going to meet any girls who have any success, because they're just basically a standard type that isn't seen nowadays as particularly attractive for the women who are local and higher value. As you can see around me here in Warsaw, it's not some economic destitute backwater nowadays, so girls are not desperate to leave, and if they wanted to leave, well, they could do that without a guide. Basically, they can just go to Paris or to Berlin or somewhere else. So the way to become, in a large part, the insider with that insider's edge of knowing where the cool places are and showing up and having that local social circle, we'll get into social circle in a minute, is to learn the local language. Because nowadays, that foreigner factor, like girls being interested in you primarily just because you're a Westerner, said not so strong. I would say actually here in Warsaw, or in Kiev or Odessa, which you know very well, and up in Riga, probably almost a minus if you are the standard Westerner who comes here as a guy. Now, it was different obviously 20 years ago, because a lot of girls were desperate to flee, and they would say, oh, foreign guy, that's a ticket out of here potentially. And maybe there's still some parts of Eastern or New Europe, as I'm calling it, where that might still apply a little bit, but that's a disappearing phenomenon, in my opinion, right? Just because nowadays the girls can travel so freely, and they basically can move without a guy. And with technology, if they're a pretty girl trapped somewhere, well, some Arab sheikh will probably make them an offer via Instagram anyways. So that kind of makes, in large part, relying on English, which is what also most tourists do, or most Westerners that come here, they don't learn Polish, for example, they don't learn Latvian or Russian in general. By not learning the local language, they basically put in the box of potential sex tourist, another digital Dave nomad, a wife hunter, which used to be a big phenomenon, say, in Ukraine, desperado. And if you go and learn the local language, then you get treated a little bit more like a local. And this happened quite a bit when I was with my last two clients here in Warsaw and up in Riga, because both of them spoke a very high level of Russian. So when we were up in Riga, well, they didn't really see us any different to the Latvians who are Russian speaking there, and there are a lot of them, about half the city of Riga is Russian speaking in principle. And even here in Warsaw, there's such big Ukrainian and Belarusian diasporas now that you also more or less get treated, you have that commonality with that diaspora when you're here in Warsaw. Now, obviously not with the Poles, for that you need to learn Polish. And I even see the difference, like last night we were out, and even though the level of English is quite high here in Warsaw, in Poland, the capital, might be a bit less obviously in the smaller provincial cities, still met at the parties that we went to, girls who didn't really speak much English. So that's the first thing about learning the local language. Obviously, it's communication. And if the girl doesn't speak any English and don't speak any Polish, well, you can use Google Translate, but it's a real pain. And it would just be a lot more valuable to already speak Polish. And the second thing is, of course, what I've already alluded to, which is you basically enter a different social group. If you can speak the local language, you're out of that box of kind of creepy sex tourist and into, cool foreigner who took a big enough interest in our culture here to learn Polish, for example. And it's also quite rare, right? So you have a little bit more of a novelty factor, I would say. So I always get a lot of resistance from guys about learning local language. I think some of it's to do with ego. It's also a bit of a time investment, I admit, especially learning Russian, Ukrainian, or Polish. Not the easiest language, same if you were to go and learn, say, Latvian or Lithuanian or another local language here in the region. But a lot of it, I think, comes from guys believing that if they speak in English, that they suddenly have a slightly higher status level because they're using English, as opposed to that kind of lower status in their eyes, Eastern European or Central European language. And I think nowadays, that is not the case. That's a misperception about the status and what it gives you. Again, if you meet some English language groupie, some girl who's really into foreigners and really wants to practice her English, then maybe that's exciting for her. But the thing is you have a lot of competition because there are a lot of guys who come here to Warsaw. It's like inundated with a lot of digital nomads who use English. So that's not going to give you the insider's edge if you are relying on using English as opposed to a local language. Но ты была, может быть, на встрече с парнем, который не говорил по-русски или
Да,
по-украински?
было. Именно не была в отношениях, а именно пересекались, именно была встреча. То было немножечко некомфортно, потому что я не все понимала, что он говорит.
Вот. И Google Translate, переводчик не помогал?
Нет, там он так переводит, что лучше не переводить.
Лучше не переводить.
Да.
Окей, интересно, да. And the final mistake that I like to point out that I see guys making is they don't have a valuable social circle. Now, social circle is something I've discussed in another video. Of course, I'll be linking all those up in cards down below in the description. And basically, I would say, with my experience here for over 10 years, when looking at my friends, other foreign guys I've seen, my clients, the way to meet the highest value women, the most beautiful women, is through social circle. But if it were that easy, everybody would do social circle. It takes a significant amount of time to develop a social circle, and you have to maintain it. You have a reputation. You need to be able to add some sort of value for people to want you in their social circle. Now, you do see amongst foreign guys who come here, they tend to hang out with each other a lot. If they're not doing the solo mission, Bin Billy, no mates, they will hang out. If they're the day gamers, they will hang out with other day gamers. If they are maybe staying something like a hostel typically, or in a hotel where there are lots of other maybe foreign guys who are solo travelers, or small groups might hang out together. The issue is that is not particularly valuable or interesting social circle for local girls here. Now it's better than being nomads, for sure. Solo missions, I've done a lot of solo missions over the years, because when I first started to come to this part of Europe, I couldn't persuade my friends to come, so I had to come on my own, and that's obviously better than not coming, but it's particularly hard if you're doing it on your own, because you don't have any sort of social proof from other people that you're obviously have value, or you're not an axe murderer or something. So that is the thing that I work on probably the most, on the in-person experience. It's like, who is going to be in your social circle, and what kind of value are you going to provide so that people will be glad to have you in the social circle, right? No one wants a free-riding leech in terms of value. You need to be able to provide something. So I focused the in-persons our experience, and it is developed over the years, and now we basically combine social circle with nightlife, because in my experience, that is the way, in a short amount of time, whether it's a few days or a week together, to get the maximum impact in terms of meeting beautiful women and having some sort of realistic shot and dating them. And over the last year or so, I've been bringing my clients, obviously here, Warsaw in Poland, also to Riga in Latvia, Almaty in Kazakhstan, and crazy Chisinau in Moldova. And what I've been doing is not just helping them with the main focus, which is social circle and nightlife, but also developing out their value, and the way they demonstrate their value can be their Instagram, getting the right pics there, having them vetted, having them upgraded, and then turning that content, putting it onto their Instagram, which I think is as I've said, is the most valuable online platform nowadays. Or if they really want to use Tinder, they can use the same content basically and put it on Tinder with their bio. It's not actually that different. There's no waste in terms of doing it, whether you use it on Tinder or you don't, because your Instagram is going to be valuable in any case. Also going to be looking about how you interact with women. You're going to have me and my 10 years of experience as the insider in Eastern Europe with you, so I can just spot the most glaring things that you can work on. And that might be, the way you interact. Maybe you're a little bit too considerate and polite. That can actually be, it's probably the most common sticking point I've seen with guys who come from Western Europe or North America, is that they tend to be a little bit too considerate, a little bit meek maybe even, and that is not appreciated here in Eastern Europe. So the in-person experience with me, the insider, I'm also known as the Special Forces by some of my clients here in this part of Europe, in New Europe. It is by application only. So down below is an application form. But before you do that, before you take your shot, because you miss 100% of the shots that you never take, said Wayne Gretzky, Canuck ice hockey legend with origins here in New Europe, since he was Polish, Ukrainian, Belarusian origin. It's a little bit debatable which he's more of, but anyways, we'll put all three in there, so he's a good representative. But before you do that, you want to go and look at a few different playlists if you haven't before. I give you a bit more of the flavor of the Zara experience. The first playlist is the cities that I'm bringing my clients to, so I've obviously mentioned them: Almaty in Kazakhstan, Warsaw in Poland, Riga, Latvia, and Chisinau in Moldova. With the Russo-Ukrainian war, unfortunately at the moment, it's not realistic to bring clients to Ukraine, and I'm obviously not bringing clients to Russia or Belarus. So go check those out first. And also my second playlist, which is a set of tutorials about how to date the 9s and 10s here in Eastern Europe. The super beautiful of the region, the Olympian level of beauty. So go check those out. If you want to dive really, really deep into the psychology here in Eastern Europe, in New Europe. A lot of my older videos were also shot obviously in Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia. Then you can go check out my podcast series. I'll link that up above as well. Got about 50 hours probably of content there, all for free. So if you want to dive deep into these topics, go check that out. This video has been jam-packed full of dating advice and value. So picture, coming here, you can hang out with the day gamers, or you're hitting up Tinder, maybe you're doing a solo mission, you're building nomads. It's not going to be optimal. You're not likely to meet very many beautiful women who are going to be interested in you. And then juxtapose that, contrast it with coming here with the Insider, where you're going to already have a cool crew to hang out with. You're going to have my encyclopedic knowledge of over 10 years in the region, and we're going to go out and we're just going to have an absolute blast. And not just meet pretty girls, but just have an amazing time and experience a city in New Europe together. So, kind of got some steps in front of me, which makes it harder to film. So, I'm going to say do swidzenia and see you in the next video. Ciao, ciao.
SAR Experience.